Israel, the setting for an intense power play between the forces of religion, politics and money, with consequences that can affect all of us, whoever and wherever we are in the world. This episode of God's Business examines what happens when a significant new force is introduced into the game of faith, identity and power in this volatile land on the shores of the Mediterranean.
Israel just has to be the most diverse small nation on earth. We focus on its wars with its neighbours, but at times it seems to be at war with itself. Wave after wave of immigrants have been invited to come here and help build the Jewish homeland. Most of them, it seems, want to be able to enjoy living the Mediterranean life. They've come from all over the world, from America, north and south, from Europe, west and east, the Middle East. From Lithuania, Poland, Brazil, Iran, Iraq, everywhere.
The latest wave of immigration poses perhaps the greatest challenge of all to a coherent idea of what the Israeli state, the Jewish state, should be. More than 1.25 million people have arrived from the former Soviet Union in little more than a decade, bringing with them their traditions, culture and language, and their strong spirit of independence.
They call them the Russians, but the people who come here from the former Soviet Union are almost as diverse as those who were here before them. As well as from Russia, they come from Georgia, Uzbekistan, Chechnya and the Ukraine. Some hardly knew they were Jews, some were able to maintain their Jewishness under Soviet rule. But however varied their backgrounds, one thing they have in common is a sense of pride, a cultural confidence.
I've rarely seen a more confident display of pride and cultural confidence than the birthday party of ANASTASIA MICHAELI, a recent arrival from Russia who is celebrating in the company of several hundred of her closest friends, many of them members of the cultural and media elite of the Russian community in Israel. But by far the most important names on ANASTASIA's guest list come from Israel's political establishment. And the most important guest of all is the leading elder statesman, Shimon Peres. He is a former prime minister and currently the vice prime minister. So what gives Anastasia, who has lived here for less than a decade, such extraordinary upward mobility? Her first success as a model and then as a television host of the Russian-language TV station Channel 9 quickly made her a prominent figure in the Russian branch of Israeli society. So the leaders of Kadima, the new ruling party of Israel, saw her as a potential vote winner, and they invited her to stand for the Knesset, the national parliament. She hasn't been elected yet, but with her high profile and networking skills, the word is that it's only a matter of time. Even the Prime Minister, Ehud Olmert, has sent a birthday greeting on video. Unfortunately, the sound is so bad that no one can hear him properly. But it's the thought that counts.
I think that the person who wants to have success, it has success. You should have success because you need to believe. When you have the goal and you go there, you will be successful everywhere. 10 years ago, when I came here for the first time, I felt that it's my country. And I decided to stay here with my husband. He came here in '72 when he was a small child.
Marrying Yosef Samuelson, a multi-millionaire businessman of Russian Jewish origin, has certainly not hindered Anastasia's progress. Yosef is not one of the notorious Russian oligarchs who have built themselves a safe haven in Israel. He has established a more modest fortune in property development, much of it in Russia. Anastasia was not born Jewish herself, but since her marriage, she's become a convert and has thus passed on Jewish identity to her 6 children. By intriguing coincidence, the influx of 1.25 million mostly Jewish newcomers to Israel matches the 1.25 million Israelis of Arab origin, who some Israelis see as an enemy within. One of the party guests, GISSIN, who's a political consultant and one-time Israeli government spokesman, sees the new Russian immigrants as a bulwark against Israel's enemies.
And in 1948, you know, all the, I would say, famous analysts in the United States and around the world predicted the country will survive only for 6 months because it was invaded by 7 Arab armies and had no natural resources. But it had one resource that they didn't put into, that's the human resource. And definitely 1 million Russian immigrants that came to Israel in the 90s and to the year 2000. And hopefully another million that we'll bring in are going to tip the balance and actually give us the edge in our ability to survive in a rather hostile environment.
Of course, Anastasia's dazzling progress cannot be replicated by most of the people who have come to Israel as immigrants. But one thing all Israelis share is the knowledge that this is a country in a state of perpetual war.
You know, what is this? You know, now we are in a very, very hard situation. It's my country and the place.
For a few noisy minutes, the underlying realities of the Middle East intrude into the celebrations, as Israeli jets scream overhead, presumably on a bombing mission to the north. This intrusion into everyone's consciousness is made even stronger, because on this particular evening, Israel is on the verge of invading Lebanon, and has already started a bombing campaign. A short war between Israel and the Lebanese militia Hezbollah was to prove traumatic for all parties, including the usually confident Israelis. Unsurprisingly, it filled people's minds throughout my trip to Israel, and it filled the schedules of Channel 9, Israel's most prominent Russian-language TV station, the channel that made Anastasia a household name. At Channel 9, I get to meet another young television presenter of Russian origin.
По-моему, я вам кого-то еще нашла, хотя вы наверняка уже все закрыли.
And, like Anastasia, Natasha MOZGOVAYA is attractive, blonde and successful. When I meet her, she is filming an historical documentary, but her experience as a war reporter has colored her view of life in Israel.
It's very cynical to say this, but the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is it's kind of conflict deluxe, with all these tanks and explosions and dead people and the real pain. This place for me as a journalist is so fascinating that it's very hard to move out, because every month, every week, every day you have something.
Natasha arrived in Israel as part of the big wave of immigration in the early 90s. This latest aliyah, as the Israelis call it, or ascension, was triggered by the collapse of the Soviet Union. For 1 million Russian Jews, Israel presented itself as a refuge from anarchy.
So I came here with my mother when I was 11 years old, where the absorption here for the young people is not very easy. And you're not exactly coming home, you know, and you're welcomed. You're supposed to find a job, you're supposed to learn a language, and the social mobility is very problematic. So it's a regular immigration.
Some Russian immigrants have got stuck at the bottom of the economic pile, but the majority have established themselves in fast-growing cities like Ashdod, bright and clean, if a little soulless. Yet even among those who have prospered, there can be a feeling of alienation, of not being fully accepted by Israeli society. They feel themselves accused of being arrogant and not fully committed to the state of Israel or even to the Jewish heritage, in strong contrast to the first Russian immigrants in Israel who came as Zionist pioneers at the turn of the 20th century.
Some groups here didn't really like Russians. So I heard lots of times like, why did you Russians came here and so on. Like every wave of immigration here receives such a warm welcoming. But for me, I don't know. know, I didn't understand what have I done, like what did I do wrong? It wasn't my decision to come here, it was my mother's, so why do you have to tell me that you stinky Russians go back to Russia?
One of the most provocative examples of the independent spirit displayed by the Russian immigrants is the way that they have ignored that most emblematic expression of Jewish identity, kosher food. The pork products in the supermarkets that Russians frequent offer a truly amazing spectacle.
Israelis, when they were waiting to greet here Russian Jews, they had some kind of nostalgia from their grandparents that built this country, the first and the second Aliyah, and then they met a million of people, very cynical and not always Zionist, and with their problems and stereotypes, and the people that were integrated well economically, but segregated totally culturally. So I think the Israeli society had a big problem to understand this phenomenon. About Russians, it's very, very popular to say the Russian immigration is a blessing for Israel. But as the old saying here goes, we like Aliyah, but we don't really like Olim. Like we like the immigration because it's, you know, it's a survival need, but we don't like immigrants.